Hi, little puppy. Hello. Hi, little puppy. Yes, you're here to visit Peekaboo and Josie. Yes, you are. You good boy. You good boy. Yes, you are. You good boy. Come here. Come here, good boy. What's his name?
Bugsy.
Bugsy.
Does he get scared with the
What's he,
storms?
Bugsy? You say like bug?
Like a bug, like a bug.
Like a bug? Bugsy?
Bugsy, honey, what are you doing?
Bugsy?
He attacked a side, so he
Bugsy,
said,
Bugsy. Come here, Bugs. Come here, Bugs. Come here, Daddy. Come here, Daddy.
I have no idea.
Come here, Daddy. Come here. Come here, Daddy. Come here, Bugsy. Bugsy. Come here, Daddy. Aw, that's a good boy. That's a good boy. Daddy loves you, yes. Peekaboo loves you, and so does the... Yes. We love you. '89, March the 31st, married. Goodbye, Gil and Jan Hammond. June and John Stevenson. June and John. The Bingham family. Tall guy there in the center with a light beige coat on is Reuben Bingham, my grandfather. And Mama Grace, my grandmother. The Bingham family. John and June. Actually, that's John and Michelle at her wedding. John and Colleen Michelle Garnet Stevenson. Yeah. Yeah. Four great men. Well, three at least. Gil, Art Regal, Sheriff, and Sheriff Corsenborn, and of course Big John. Story of Mary Ruth and I, Johnny, little Johnny, walking all the way from Rosedale Swimming Pool to made the front page of the Kentucky Post, walking all the way to Wolf Road where we lived. Dad and Johnny. Danny's hat going on to heaven from the barber shop. Bless Danny's heart. Dad is a little boy, 5 years old, when his dad was crushed between two railroad cars on the southbound hump, the L&N Railroad. Lost his father. And Dad later in life was injured on the railroad also, as was I. Part of life. I spent 3 years there, Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, secretary. The Whosoever Will group, right there, played at all the nursing homes in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, Lexington, and Louisville. Most have gone on to heaven. Randy Wallace and I are still going to Fairhaven Rescue Mission every fourth Friday for 30 years, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Simon Kenton, class of 1961, at our last big reunion. 2011, June the 11th, 50th reunion. (2016). Barbara Brander, when she's young and when she's a few years older. Bless her heart. Daniel Cameron and his wonderful wife, and Big John, politicking. You win some, you lose some, but you don't give up. Keep working for Jesus. Pictures of the bus campaign with the Robinson Family Singers. My first race for Commissioner of Agriculture, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, 1975. 30 years old. With Gil and Jan Hammond and myself, Miss June. Tri-State Gospel. 34 years, 107.5 FM on the radio dial, Falmouth, Kentucky, Post Office Box 50, zip code 41040. The stewards of WIOK 107.5 FM on the radio dial. We love them. Gil and I had the same birth date, September the 4th. I'll be 82, he'll be 86. Time passes on. Miss June and Miss Jan, the loves of our lives. Jimmy Noakes, myself, Johnny Stevenson, and Eddie Smallwood, Martin Road Boys.
I'm Martha McCallum, and this is the story breaking right now. President Trump's extraordinary trip to Saudi Arabia. He is at a state dinner right now. You can bet that it is very elaborate based on what we saw in terms of his welcome as he begins his 4-day swing through the Middle East. The goal on this stop, $1 trillion of investment in the U.S. by the Saudis. So far, they have locked in $600 billion in terms of the commitment from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to invest in everything from defense to infrastructure for AI, a really big part of this trip as well. MBS has suggested that they will get to that $1 trillion mark in investment in time. President Trump given a royal welcome. Arabian stallions escorted the president's vehicle. And how about this? A custom-built mobile McDonald's truck was rolled out for the president's time in Saudi Arabia as well. You can bet he was looking forward to taking part in that. And you can hear a rendition of God Bless the USA as the president took the stage for these remarks as he heralded the growing strength of the new Middle East.
A new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence.
Big message there in that soundbite that you just heard. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy following it all live from Riyadh. Hi, Peter.
And Martha, as far as Trump deals have gone since he got back to office in January, today's actually seemed like it was pretty easy. He came in on Air Force One. He talked about how he thought that $600 billion was pretty good, but that he wanted $1 trillion. And then about 4 hours later, that is exactly what the Crown Prince pledged.
In the coming months, we will work on second phase to finalize the remaining agreement to raise them to $1 trillion.
That's what I love to hear for America.
It wasn't just about business deals
with good people.
Forum. President Trump talked about how he will soon drop sanctions on Syria on the sidelines of a meeting with Syria's interim president tomorrow to give that country a chance to thrive. He also said that he's going to help Saudi Arabia defend itself from Iran and its proxies, and that he's going to do his very best to make a deal with Tehran to prevent them from ever getting a nuclear weapon.
As I have shown repeatedly, I am willing to end past conflicts and forge new partnerships for a better and more stable world, even if our differences may be very profound, which obviously they are in the case of Iran. I have never believed in having permanent enemies. I am different than a lot of people think. I don't like permanent enemies, but sometimes you need enemies to do the job, and you have to do it right.
And at some point between Lee Greenwood as the opening song and The Village People as the closing song, President Trump stressed to this crowd that was a mix of half Americans and half Saudi business people that he wants to be known, he wants his legacy to be as a peacemaker in the Middle East. Martha.
Thank you very much, Peter. Let's bring in Brian Hook. He served as special representative for Iran during President Trump's first administration. He was also senior advisor and then to then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Along with Pompeo, he was targeted by Iran because of the administration's hardline stance towards the country. Brian, welcome. Very good to have you here. What is your reaction to what the president had to say about his visit to Saudi Arabia, the meaning of it, especially with regard to the message it sends to Iran?
Well, in 2017, Martha, he made a speech in Riyadh, and at the end of the speech, he talked about wanting to create new partnerships. And out of that grew the Abraham Accords 3.5 years later. So here he is, 8 years later in Saudi Arabia, and he's talking again about new partnerships. That could include Syria. He lifted sanctions on Syria after 10 years of civil war in Syria. I think the Iranian people would like to be on very good terms with Israel. The regime, the Iranian regime does not, but Saudi Arabia could come and normalize with Israel. New partnerships for peace. And so while there's a lot of deal making going on, there is also a really large component of stabilizing the Middle East, moderating the extremism. MBS has been a great leader in that regard. And, you know, I would say the Gulf really represents the new Middle East that President Trump was talking about. And this trip helps bring that Middle East into existence.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting in those comments we just played from President Trump. He talked about technology, not terrorism. And the AI part of this deal that they are working on, you know, obviously has to make places like China stand up and take notice as well, Brian.
Yeah, the AI component is big. I saw that Sam Altman from OpenAI is on this trip. And that'll be a focus in Saudi, but it'll also be a focus in UAE. UAE under Sheikh Tahnoon is a leader in AI. And, you know, they're talking about $1.3 trillion of new investment in the United States. AI is going to be a part of that. I think for these countries in the Gulf to continue on their positive path, which is the opposite of the Iranian regime's path, AI is a big part of it. And the United States leads on AI. And having all of these leaders in tech come to the Middle East, tech not terrorism, is a really good message for that region, and I think it'll resonate.
Let's listen to what the president said about Iran today. Watch.
We'd imposed unprecedented sanctions on Iran and starved the regime of resources to fund terror. They were unable to fund anything because they had no money left. They had no money. But the new administration came in and let them have a lot of money, and you saw what happened. Was not money well spent?
So what would a deal with Iran look like? And do you have confidence that they would ever give up their nuclear weapons work, their enrichment of uranium, and ever agree to having it moved potentially to a third-party country?
Well, there's been 4 rounds of talks, 3 or 4 rounds of talks so far with the Iranians that's been led by Steve Witkoff, the president's lead negotiator. The Iranian regime is not negotiating from a position of strength. Thanks to Israel, they've lost most of their proxies. Their last functioning proxy are the Houthis. And the President Trump has waged a pretty significant bombing campaign to degrade them. And so if the Iranians were smart, they would take the very sincere offering that President Trump is offering them. And it's quite simple. I think, for the Iranians, you don't need to enrich to have peaceful nuclear power. UAE has peaceful nuclear power and they don't enrich. More than half the countries in the world that have nuclear power do not enrich. It's not too much to ask of the Iranian regime. And so if we can end enrichment, I think that may be a very good deal. And that, based on what the president and Steve Witkoff has said, that may be the kind of deal they're pursuing. But I hope the Iranians do it the easy way.
We'll see. Obviously, it's a huge issue of pride with a regime that has been under tremendous pressure over the recent years, especially under the Israeli dismantling of most of their proxies, as you point out. Brian Hook, thank you very much. I also spoke to Brian for a podcast this week, so deeper dive with him there. Thank you very much, Brian. So, brand new clip of President Trump's interview with Sean Hannity that will air tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. Watch.
Well, I've been busy, but I've enjoyed it because we're getting things accomplished. We're getting things done. You can have times when you're working very hard and not getting things done. That happens too. But we're getting a lot done. I don't think there's ever been a little period like this with the potential nuclear war. And 2 countries, they have very good leaders, people I know very well. And it was a very important process we got involved with India and Pakistan.
We'll look forward to more of that tonight with Sean at 9 o'clock on Air Force One, his long discussion with President Trump. And with that, we go to the White House and bring in Morgan Ortagus, President Trump's deputy special presidential envoy to the Middle East. Morgan, great to have you with us today. I want to start by playing another soundbite from President Trump's speech today that talks about the birth of a modern Middle East. Watch this.
The birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries. The so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves.
Very interesting piece of that speech, I thought. President Trump pointing at the nation builders who were intervening in the Middle East, saying that nobody knows how to fix these countries better than the countries themselves, throwing a little bit of shade at prior administrations with those comments, Morgan, and looking forward to what he calls a modern new Middle East. Your thoughts?
Well, the president's speech was spot on, and it was so prescient for where we are today between the United States and Saudi Arabia. This is a relationship that is decades long, but President Trump is clearly taking the relationship with Saudi Arabia, with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to the next level. What's really crucially important, what we did in Trump 1 was to make sure that we elevated the status of Israel and our Gulf Arab partners, right? They did the opposite in the Biden administration. administration. Biden campaigns on making Saudi Arabia a pariah state. President Trump not only restored the United States' relationship with Saudi Arabia, his very first phone call as president was to the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And I believe truly that through all of the problems that we have in the Middle East, these two men that you're seeing on the stage today, President Donald J. Trump and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, there's almost nothing that we can't solve together. You see today that we're working on historic investment and trade relationship, the largest announcement of procuring of defense weaponry in the United States ever announced between Saudi Arabia and the United States was announced today. $600 billion in investment and trade. And it's not just defense, sophisticated AI and other things. So when we look at the Middle East, when we look at Syria, that announcement today, that came out of the partnership between President Trump and Mohammed bin Salman. And we look around the Middle East, the problems that we saw will be between, in many ways, between these two.
Yeah, we're seeing more great video of this trip, and a large state dinner is underway. But let me ask you this. The president sort of teased ahead to something that he has wanted to see since the first administration of the Abraham Accords, and that's an agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. But what has to happen in Israel with regard to Gaza before that can ever happen, Morgan?
You know, when we did Abraham Accords in the first Trump administration, what we really did is we isolated the Islamic Republic of Iran. We put the maximum pressure campaign on them, which is again in effect right now because Iran funds the terrorism, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. They are the major funder behind these terrorist groups, and we isolated them. Now we're doing it a little differently this time. We're still in the max pressure campaign, but my boss Steve Witkoff is also negotiating with them. So you have to remember that we got Abraham Accords not because we pressured Israel, but because we pressured our enemies and we elevated our friends. We stood beside Israel, and no one has stood beside Israel more than President Donald J. Trump, the first official to visit the White House. Foreign official was, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu. We will continue that incredibly close relationship and partnership with Israel. We will get more friends and more partners to join the Abraham Accords over the next 4 years, but it will be from a position of strength through honoring our relationship and our commitment to Israel, not by punishing them.
Morgan Ortegas, thank you very much as we continue to see these scenes from a visually stunning trip to Saudi Arabia today. We look forward to hearing more of the outcomes from this historic visit. Morgan, thank you very much. Good to have you. So they are the doubters that President Trump's promise of they're doubting President Trump's promise of a golden age, I should say.
This is not Liberation Day, it's Recession Day in the United States of America.
So I don't call it Liberation Day, I call it National Sales Tax Day.
Shame on you, 3-4.
Tax Day.
Shame on you.
Well, their hopes dashed to a certain extent, I guess. These were two big signs today of the Trump new economic boom in the making and the president striking a very optimistic tone.
Amen. Thank you, Donald Trump. President Trump.
The days of economic misery under the last administration
And J.D.
are rapidly
Vance.
giving way to the greatest economy in the history of the world.
This program is brought to you by Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Going to be in a recession. So inflation hitting a 4-year low in the first report since President Trump's global trade shakeup. Consumer prices up 2.3% last month compared to a year ago. That was a tiny bit lower than the Wall Street estimates of what we were expecting here. And here's President Trump a short time ago in Saudi Arabia.
The groceries, gasoline, energy, and all other prices are down. The days of economic misery under the last administration are rapidly giving way to the greatest economy in the history of the world.
With that, we bring in former Trump economic advisor Steve Moore and former Obama economic advisor Robert Wolf, a Fox News contributor. Great to have both of you with us. Robert, you know, we heard a lot of doom and gloom from a lot of Democrats. We played in the tease moments ago. They said, you know, we were going to be in a recession. They were ready for that. Almost sounded like they were cheering for it in response to these moves by President Trump. What do you say to these numbers?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, anytime you have inflation going down, it's a great thing. It's still higher than the Fed target rate, so hopefully it continues to come down. I wasn't one of those touting a recession. Actually, Steve and I were both on the same page that we think inflation was going to stay a bit long tail. And that's nice to see that is starting to reverse itself. Listen, I think that myself, as well as economists and Republicans like Steve and others, we were for targeted tariffs. We weren't for across-the-board tariffs. We were for going after China on things like steel and maybe England on autos. I think targeted made sense. I think no one's for trade wars. That's why many economists thought there would be a recession. I'm glad to see that he's taking a 90-day kind of let's wait and see pause. I wish it was 180 days. I think that we need to use tariffs as a blunt instrument and not across the board. And I think that would.
Robert, all I can think when I look at this situation at this point, and Steve, I want to get your thoughts on this. This is classic President Trump. Go for the jugular. Really go. When he came out with the board of the numbers on it, this is the tariffs we're going to bring against every single country. Wall Street freaking out, people taking those numbers very literally at that point. When it appears now, and some of us thought this is what it was at the time, that this was just sort of the first salvo. This gets people to the table, it shakes them up a little bit, and you go to 145, Steve, with China. And then you come down to 30%, which is a very large tariff, and it looks like they're getting some kind of deal, Steve.
No, actually, I agree with you, Martha. I think this is classic Trump. It's vintage Trump in terms of his negotiating tactics. When you showed those clips earlier of many of the Democratic leaders, saying Trump was going to lead to a recession and we were going to have runaway inflation and so on, I had deja vu all over again because when I worked for Trump on the 2016 campaign, that's exactly what the Democrats said back then. He's going to remember that, Martha? He's going to cause a Great Depression.
Oh yeah, they're hoping for it.
And of course, we had a nice boom when Trump came in. Now, Robert and I are in agreement. I'm not a big Trump guy. I'm not a big tariff guy. I agree with him. I think it would have been better if we maybe just concentrated on China. But in some ways, Robert, all's well that ends well. Right now, things are going pretty much, I guess, apparently, according to the plan Trump had laid out all along. I am a little bit nervous about what happens in 30 days. In 90 days. Are we going to have those agreements in hand? I hope so. So I'm not saying we're out of the rough waters yet, but I'm saying, boy, you look at what's happened the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's amazing. 3,500 point increase in the stock market, a low inflation number. And let's not forget, just a week ago, we had a really pretty good jobs number too.
Yeah, I'm struck by all the Wall Street firms coming out. They're saying, 80% chance of recession, Robert, 60%, and then they come out, we can put this up on the screen, JP Morgan says, we're dialing down our risk of recession now that this China deal thing has been worked out. Don't you think there was a huge overreaction on Wall Street when it should have been pretty clear that this was negotiating tactics, and the president does want us to have fair trade and strong trade with all these countries?
Well, I think economists look at the data, and the data was a bit, scary based on what was announced. Now, obviously, they're not there reading that it's a negotiation or not. That's not what the economist does. So, for example, GDP did come down negative 0.3%. It was not a great number. The jobs report had a 50,000 reversal on jobs. So this is not a time to spike the football. I'm glad that we're starting to see trade deals. I'm glad that we're talking about an economy growing as opposed to the idea of a recession. That's not what an economist does. I also think a lot of businesses that I speak to, they're starting to buy their needs because they're still nervous of supply chains. Right. They're nervous of what happens in 90 days. Right. So there's nothing definitive. So we have to wait and see, but certainly we're better off today than we were 30 days ago.
Yeah, I just think that certainly everyone, Democrats, Republicans should be hoping that the outcome is a good one for Americans rather than trying to cheer it lower. And I do think that a lot of companies bought a lot of supplies ahead of all of this because they were concerned about how much they would have in their storage areas for all the production they needed to do. And when that shakes out, we may see another bump and adjustment here.
Can I make one other quick point? It's also, our businesses are incredibly resilient. I have to say, because they get those tariffs, Governor and I were both, boy, this is going to be tough for our businesses. They kind of soldiered through this. And so I just want to do a nod to our American companies.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Men and women who run these companies are fantastic.
Absolutely. They knew how to, stockpile some of the things they were going to need for a while, and most of them grit and bear it, and hope for the very best for themselves and for the country. Robert, thank you. Steve, thank you. I know you guys both hope for the best for the country. Thank you very much. Good to see you. All right, so the House Minority Leader, once again, Hakeem Jeffries, dares DHS to arrest 3 Democrats accused of storming a New Jersey immigration facility. Next.
This is the most ridiculous thing I've seen in a long time.
To the possible arrests of members of Congress.
They should be arrested. Shameful.
Facility in New Jersey. The feds with this warning after that incident Friday.
And just because you are a member of Congress or just because you are a public official does not mean you are above the law. We will continue. If you assault a law enforcement officer, we will also make sure you answer to justice. So I think that arrests are still on the table for this. This is an ongoing investigation.
Here's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries with our senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram today. Watch this.
What happens if they were to go and arrest these members, or if they would try to sanction them here in House of Representatives?
They'll find out.
What would you do?
They'll find out.
Of course. I mean, does not broach a...
They'll find out.
Doesn't that go across...
That's a red line.
What's the red line, though? I mean, I know we have to...
It's a red line. It's very clear. We're not going to be intimidated by their tactics to try to force principled opposition from not standing up to their extremism. No one's intimidated by this dude. No one. And so there are clear lines.
And you do not intimidate us, sir.
Dare not cross.
AOC also warning the feds
Shameful.
if they lay a finger on the lawmakers, quote, we are going to have a problem, she says.
You got the problem.
So an American
breaking the law.
emergency task force, I should say now, taking the problems on at Newark Airport, including a radar outage 2 weeks ago that led to this terrifying exchange between air traffic control and a pilot.
674 weeks, radar contact lost to us, our radar, so have Bravo clearance. No, you do not have a Bravo clearance, and we don't have a radar, so I don't know where you are.
You don't have a radar, I don't know where you are, and then it happened again at Newark Airport. And with that, we bring in Republican Senator Tim Sheehy of Montana, a commercial pilot, a former Navy SEAL, Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, and member of the Commerce Committee that oversees FAA. Senator, great to have you with us today. As you join us, there's currently a 45-minute ground stop delay at Newark Airport and an effort that has been announced to address what the Department of Transportation Secretary is calling 11 air traffic control systems that have gone dark several times now. So this is a very unstable situation. What can be done about it at the government level?
Well, this has been coming for a long time, Martha. This is not a surprise to anybody who's actively involved in our national airspace system. America is the birthplace of aviation and aerospace. We've innovated since the very beginning, from the Wright brothers, over 100 years ago through today. But we've seen in the last several decades is an increased sclerotic, atrophy of our national airspace capability, from certifying new aircraft to creating new pilots and mechanics and air traffic controllers to our national airspace control system. It's a 1950s era bureaucracy that's buckling under its own weight. It's been happening in slow motion for a long time. And of course, during the Biden administration, we saw the FAA taking all the time they needed to eliminate the terms cockpit and unmanned and encourage all these different initiatives when we didn't have enough radars.
And they had billions of dollars that were already allocated to upgrade all of these systems during the last administration. And I don't know what happened to the taxpayer money that was supposed to be going to fixing this, but it would be funny if it wasn't so incredibly dangerous. And I really hope that we don't see a tragedy, but no one should be surprised if that's what happens. Here's Scott Kirby, the United Airlines CEO this morning, Senator. Listen to this.
It is absolutely safe. Look, if you're an air traffic controller, I appreciate the work. They're incredible professionals in everything that they do to keep the sky safe. But it's stressful, it's tense, they're understaffed, they're working lots of overtime hours. But what we do when there are situations like this, communication, radar outages, anything, we have backup procedures and backups to the backups.
Backups to the backup. So my question is, and I know that Elon Musk's folks took a look at the technology that we use at FAA and basically said, yeah, that, dusty stuff in the corner, please don't ever use that stuff again. Why can't we have, experts like them come in and just overhaul this system and give them a very tight timeline to do it with the money that's already been allocated?
Well, we can and we will, and that's what's going to happen now, Martha. And in fairness, this body I'm sitting in now, the U.S. Congress, is very much to blame for this issue. We've been unwilling to make the tough decisions about updating our national airspace system for years, and now it's coming back to bite us. And as you said, hopefully don't have a tragedy. We just had a tragedy a few months ago, as you know, right here in D.C. So it's time to upgrade. What does that mean? That means a faster pipeline for air traffic controllers. There's a man with a gun standing not 20 yards from me who's guarding our Capitol, who is an air traffic controller in the U.S. Air Force. And instead of becoming a civilian air traffic controller, he has become a Capitol Police officer because the pay is better. There's a lot of things we can do. It's time to get to work. Frankly, some pretty easy fixes.
Yeah, and I just feel that, the money that was allocated, someone needs to track down what happened to it and why the task that it was designated for still hasn't happened. It's really shocking. Senator Sheehy from Montana, thank you very much. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Martha.
So this trial is really turning into something just absolutely abhorrent when you listen to what happened here. A star witness is on the stand in Diddy's federal sex trafficking trial. What his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, is now revealing about the freak-offs, she said, that would last as long as 72 hours. And that video that you remember of him throwing her in the hallway was during one of those. And disturbing testimony here in Manhattan in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. His ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, on the stand right now. The music mogul facing several charges, including sex trafficking and allegations that he forced people into sex parties known as freak-offs. He could face life in prison if he's found guilty on these charges. Correspondent CB Cotton joins us now live outside the courthouse. A warning that some of this reporting is graphic. CB.
Hi, Martha, that's right. Well, R&B singer Cassie Ventura has wiped away tears on the witness stand today while describing graphic details of her previous sex life with the rapper. Now, telling jurors that she felt like she couldn't say no. Her life looks a lot different now. She's married with 2 kids and expecting another very soon. But she told jurors she was 19 with a 17-year age gap when she met Diddy and signed with his record label. She said their relationship turned sexual when she was 21 and they were together for a decade. She's a key witness for prosecutors who accused Diddy of using fear and intimidation to coerce and traffic Cassie and other women into drug-fueled sexual parties with male escorts called freak-offs, all while Diddy watched and sometimes recorded. Cassie testified today that Diddy controlled almost every aspect of her life, to include the weekly freak-offs. She told jurors one of these sexual encounters was happening when Combs was caught on camera assaulting her in this disturbing 2016 Los Angeles hotel surveillance video obtained exclusively and released by CNN last year. Diddy apologized in a since-deleted Instagram post. Cassie said instead of music, freak-offs became her job. She testified that the longest one, get this, lasted 4 days. Diddy's defense attorneys have admitted to jurors that Diddy's relationships were toxic.
Goodness gracious.
There was domestic violence, but they've said all the sexual encounters were consensual. They've even described Diddy's accusers as strong and capable. Cassie's since settled 2023 lawsuit led to dozens of other claims, Martha, all of which he denies. Back to you.
CB, thank you very much. Downtown Manhattan. So in the meantime, the DNC is moving to oust their rising star David Hogg as vice chair as he calls for a shakeup, and that rattles party elders. Next.
I wouldn't call this a circular firing squad. We've replaced those smoke-filled back rooms that they fought so hard against creating with a culture of seniority politics that is killing the future of our party. That's not acceptable. It needs to be, are you the best person to meet this moment?
Here's why you should switch from Google to DuckDuckGo on all.
Next today at untuckit.com.
The Democratic National Committee now stepping closer to removing Vice Chair David Hogg, who is pushing to primary some of the Democratic lawmakers that generally these organizations try to support. So the DNC says the dispute is about voting procedures in the vice chair elections, but Hogg calls it a fast-track move to get rid of him. With that, we bring in Tomi Lahren, host of Tomi Lahren's Fearless on Outkick, and Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, both Fox News contributors. So Leslie, let me start with you. They obviously don't like what David Hogg is saying, and now they're trying to claim that it had something to do with the procedures in his election, because some are complaining that they didn't adhere to the strict diversity standard that was part of that election process. Let's go way back and look at the way they were supposed to do this election. Watch.
You may vote for 2 males, 2 females, 2 of any gender, okay? No, you can't do that because we've got to balance. You could vote for 1 of any gender, okay? Or no, non-binary gender.
Any gender.
Oh boy, that was confusing. Leslie, what's your take on this push to clearly to push out David Hogg and to use this as an excuse?
I don't really think it's an excuse, totally. I know with the timing people think it is, and I'll tell you why. Before David Hogg, and not just David, but Malcolm Kenyatta were in their positions at the DNC, there was a lot of talk that the 2 of them were being pushed into that position, and there was a woman named Kaylin Free who was going for the same position, and she brought up this lack of gender neutrality at that time. So I'm not surprised. Now, they're not being kicked out. They can be put on the ballot again. They can be voted for again. And, you know, months down the road at the end of the year, we could be having an entirely different conversation. However, as a Democrat, I want my party to be united. I think Republicans do as well for their party. At the DNC, we want everybody to be united and on the same page. And it doesn't mean you have to be in lockstep, if you will, with everybody in the messaging. But, you know, David Hogg has definitely ruffled some feathers talking about primarying. You know, Democrats, I'm one that believes you flip red seats, not blue seats, but I don't believe you push somebody out for doing it.
So, Tomi, is that what this is about? Or is this David Hogg basically saying we need to make sure that we have candidates who can win in these elections, and if it means pushing out some of the old guard, so be it?
Martha, either option is not a good look for the Democrat Party. So either they're pushing him out, as you said, because he's been chirping up about changing the dynamics in the Democrat Party. So again, the party of democracy strikes again. Or on the other side, they're pushing him out due to gender imbalance. I'm actually quite confused because I thought the left believed you could identify as whatever you want. So perhaps that is a new route that David Hogg could take. They can't define a woman, so I'm not sure why they're so wrapped up in this gender identity issue. But Martha, either option is not good. Either you're playing into woke identity politics on the one hand, or you're pushing out somebody who doesn't join in lockstep with your idea of loyalty to the Democratic establishment initiative. Neither is good for the Democrat Party. At this rate, Republicans may never lose an election again, Martha.
So, Leslie, what do you think? Do you think he is a positive voice for the party in some ways because he's trying to shake things up and trying to find people who can actually win elections? Or do you think he's a negative force? Do you want him out?
I personally don't want him out, but I have to say there's to both. I would say both in response to your question. The good, you know, the pros, in my opinion, of David are he's a great fundraiser. He gets people to vote, and he has a really strong following among the youth that are Democrats and getting those youth out to vote. The negatives, I would say, like I said, I don't care who's doing it or what your age group is or your gender. You know, we got to spend money to flip red seats. We don't need to flip blue seats. And then additionally, those seats that he wants to flip, it's not just that they're, you know, old school Democrats the DNC is supporting. They're people that are more moderate. And historically, we, my party, win more elections typically with more moderate than more progressive left-leaning candidates, which are the type of candidates that David and some in my party want to put forth that has not been successful and was not successful in the last election.
I hear your point. I think it's interesting that he's pushing for meritocracy in terms of the selection of the leadership of the party over this issue of, 2 women, 2 men, so one person of any gender or whatever they were trying to achieve there. Leslie, thank you very much. Tommy, always good to see you. Thanks. So new reports that Joe Biden struggled to recognize big names like George Clooney as the media's muzzle on the former president's decline has melted away big time. Howie Kurtz is all over this story with the inside scoop next.
Learn more about safe, clean, reliable propane at propane.com/home.
There have been a number of books that have come out, deeply sourced from Democratic sources, that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities.
You're wrong. There's nothing to sustain that.
No. So former President Biden denying claims published in recent books like Fight. A new book claims that the Biden aides privately discussed the potential that he might need to be put in a wheelchair if he did win a second term. It also quotes David Plouffe, who ran President Obama's campaign and worked on Harris's presidential bid. He says Biden totally bleeped us by not dropping out sooner, and it was a disservice to the country and to the party for his family and advisors to allow him to run again. With that, we bring in Media Buzz host Howie Kurtz. Howie, great to have you with us. The sort of backpedaling that many in the media are doing right now, when so many of these signs were clear, we discussed them here, our reporters asked Karine Jean-Pierre about them many times in the briefing room. They were fair questions at that time. Watch this back and forth then and now from Jake Tapper, who is the writer of this new book that has just dropped. Watch.
I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay,
That's what
I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. He's sharp physically. Mentally. Yeah. I think the question is physically. He's 81, and his memory, it doesn't seem great. It's not horrible, but I don't understand the outrage.
Bottom line is the White House was lying, not only to the press, not only to the public, but they were lying to members of their own cabinet about how bad things had gotten.
Yeah, so you can see the difference there pretty clearly, Howie, with us.
This is an outrageous embarrassment because the White House was lying. And we all saw that in a disastrous debate against Donald Trump, in which it all blew up and Biden was forced out. And, they were risking his health because the idea was, well, if he's reelected, he's going to need a wheelchair, but it'll be political suicide to put him in a wheelchair now, endangering his own health, which is really hard to fathom. Now, I know that FDR was in a wheelchair, but the press at that time agreed not to show him, and he wasn't 81. So I think it's all coming out now in graphic detail. The wheelchair question he had a significant deterioration of his spine. And his White House doctor would say, I'm trying to keep him alive, and you guys, the staff, are trying to kill him.
Yeah. It goes to the question of his perhaps selfishness of pushing this. And I think that's a lot of the outrage that you see in part from the press and in part from the people around him, including David Plouffe, Howie.
Yeah, for him to drop all those F-bombs, I think shows the intense anger, and they are not happy with his rehab tour on The View, which wasn't even buying it, and on BBC. They want him to get off the stage, hopefully not trip, and stay there.
Yeah, I thought it was revealing that he didn't recognize George Clooney, and his aide had to say like this.
Kentucky News.
Leaders say the new headquarters will bring hundreds of officers and staff under one roof downtown.
2 months after the end of this year's legislative session, Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams ceremonially signed a bill into law focused on maternal health. It allows for freestanding birthing centers in the state. It also clarifies the state's near-total abortion ban, stating the procedure can be done only to save the life of the mother.
The University of Louisville is celebrating a milestone, the opening of the Traeger Microforest project in Founders Square. Researchers are using this space to look into the impact of urban greening on human health. That's your news in 90.
The Golden
A
Triangle.
lot of cloud cover out there right now. You look at these cameras in most areas, not seeing much rain, but we definitely have some rain out there, just not where we were looking in any of those particular locations. You can see a lot of rain across the northern half. You have some across.
Here as we go over them. Kentucky stuff.
Pull up here and go up the lane and come back down, so I'm facing at the school here.
Oh, okay.
We can do it right here for you. Get a straight on shot of the school. Your side, or you want me to get straight on? Can you do it from that angle, or would you rather be straight?
Straight on. That's good. Right here, Simon Kenton Pride, Independence, Kentucky. As you can see, where we'll be having the Simon Kenton's class of 61, 1961, this Saturday, May the 17th, at LaRosa's Pizza Place here, and the Simon Kenton Pioneer Room. Right next to Deaton's. Corner of 536 and 17. Simon Kenton Class 1961, having our reunion at LaRosa's in Independence, Kentucky. in the Simon Kenton Pioneer Room, May the 17th, that's this Saturday, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Come on and join us all, the classmates of Simon Kenton 1961. I just want to drop in and say hello. Drop in and say hello. Heading back home now to 38 Macomb Road, Independence, Kentucky. Travels with John and June Geiman-Stephenson. It's the Holy Spirit's job to convict, God's job to judge, our job to love. We love you all. Had a wonderful day with Gil and Jan Hammond and Jonathan, their son. Had a great lunch.
Gotta go back out there and roll back. I always leave my glass case out there. So that way some jobs in there. And you notice he's laying.
Barbara, Gerald, Mary Ruth, Johnny, and Judy Stephenson. All 5 graduated from Simon Kenton High School. Johnny, Garnett, and Alton Stephenson, Bingham Stephenson. Barbara and Jean. Aunt Mary.